air, but it's good to know if you're in this situation what you need to do. So that's why I'm going through this exercise right now, so it's very clear of how to determine what we should do here. Let's click close, and let's go back in here. I'm going to scan again, and then we're going to fire it up, and then we're going to evaluate it. Now we'll kind of see how the startup goes. Again, when I started it up right there, it kind of started and wanted to die. So make sure it's out of gear, clutch in here, and let me fire it up. So right there, it wanted to die. I didn't give it gas to keep it running. So this now leads me in to what we need to take a look at next here. This is all part of the idle control routine. So we're balancing. So this video, we're kind of bouncing around a little bit. You'll find that you need to deal with your injector scaling right off the bat, and you need to deal with your idle control. So it's going to be one and the other. Now in this situation where I've started up and it died, that was an indication that my startup airflow isn't enough as my coolant temperature is getting hotter and hotter. We can take a look at the coolant temperature. My coolant temperature is showing 179 right now. So that's going to be telling me that I need to go into my startup airflow table and command more airflow so that my throttle plate opens more under starting as the engine's warmer, because before when I started it up cold, it started up just fine. Everything was good. But now things have changed, it's gotten warmer, and we need to increase our startup airflow. So let's do that. Let's take care of that first. I'm going to go here and let's disconnect from this vehicle because we're going to have to go fix it. We're going to go into our airflow, and we're going to go in here to idle, into airflow and into startup. And we find our startup airflow is in our table here. Now this table is going to be based on engine coolant temperature versus engine runtime. So we're going to find 0 is the time where we're cranking the engine over, and as soon as it exceeds about 350 to 400 RPMs, it's going to start our timer in the table. That's going to be our 0 time. It's going to traverse across the table here in our startup airflow that we're requesting and trying to offset the airflow and adding more airflow in. After 4 seconds, it should theoretically then drop out and go back into whatever the airflow is coming from our airflow final minimum. We're going to take a look at this when we fire it up this next time. We're going to log it and see what that looks like, so we can actually play it back and kind of break down the individual portions of this so you can determine what's going on in a data log. But let's go in here. We can find if we're right around 170, 160 here, this is our values that we're commanding. This is going to be in grams per second. We're going to raise this value up. I'm going to go and double this. So let's go here and just double it. So what this is going to do is, I'm going to go by 10 times here. Let's click no. Let's try that. I did the wrong change. I actually went 10 times. I wanted to go and just double it and not put 10 here. There we go. Now it was supposed to be a 10. I was thinking doubling my mind, and I put 10 in here, and I clicked X. So by going in here and commanding more airflow, that's going to crack our throttle plate open. That's going to allow that same kind of thing if we were going to start the car and we were giving a little bit more throttle to allow more airflow in to fire off the engine. The same kind of concept, but doing it all virtually. We want our drive-by-wire to be able to do all of it for us. So we can jump in the car, turn the key, fire it up, throttle's going to open on its own, it's going to go and do its thing, and it's going to run into the programming properly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to double it. And actually, let's go, you know what, let's do this. Let's grab our higher value, something from a colder temperature. We start it right about in here, about 68 to 90 degrees here when we started off. Let's just take all of those values here and populate it, and let's just do a vertical interpolation. Let's just kind of throw those values in the table. We're just going to be kind of standardizing the table. We want to have more airflow here, so by commanding more airflow here, theoretically, it should do what we want. Let's just try this. We've just grabbed our colder row here, so the colder coolant temperature versus the time, and then we've thrown our higher requested airflow offsets for the startup airflow. Now, a couple things about this. We do have a startup time over speed and under speed. This is going to be how long it applies our crank mode for. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to change this actually. We'll just leave it there at 2 seconds, 2 seconds. So it's going to be dissipating. So it's going to be holding us in our startup airflow for, we'll look at this as coolant temperature versus crank mode time. It'll be holding us after we've exited our cranking enrichment, or the cranking table, I should say, the cranking RPM, which is about 350, 400. Once we exited that, it'll hold us into this startup airflow table for 1 second, and then it'll transition into the normal airflow commanded here. So we'll leave those values alone. We'll just run with those. One other thing I want to factor in here is the startup. We want to make sure that we're commanding here realistic RPM for startup. We did go in here and make all these values the same in our table. We're finding this is based on engine runtime versus coolant temp. We're right about here in our table, about this last 1 or 2 columns here, 152 probably. So we're around 160. Looking at our coolant temperature, I don't have that open here. We were right about 160, so we're right in here. So we're seeing we want to fire it about 1200 RPM and then taper it down to about 950. we can see its engine runtime. For the first 10 seconds, we want it to fire up and then slowly come down. So we need to make sure our startup RPM target is going to match what we're trying to do here for startup airflow. Let's try this. Let's just give that a shot. I'm going to flash it here quick, and we'll be patient. Now, I think the idle control is actually cooperating pretty well. But a lot of the reason why the idle control is working out is because I haven't touched my MAF curve, because I don't necessarily need to. I just need to get my injector data information tweaked. The more we start to change the MAF curve, especially at the idle area, the more inaccurate the idle control is going to be, and then the more we're going to be chasing our tail. So the less that we change, the more simplistic approach we have to this, the better. Now again, if you did have your mass airflow housing size change, if it was a larger MAF housing than stock, you would have to go in and figure out your differences between your stock MAF housing size and the new MAF housing size. That's usually a factor of about 10, 20, 30. You'd multiply your entire MAF curve by that factor of 10, 20, 30, and then you'd scale out for your new MAF housing diameter. That would get your MAF flow proper versus the frequency coming from the MAF sensor. But in this case, we shouldn't have to do that. Again, it's really, really important to not dive in and start to attack the MAF curve. I see a lot of people use that calibrating or editing strategy to immediately attack the MAF curve and go after that when they've done bigger injectors. And a lot of time, again, it's the injector data that we need to go after, not necessarily the MAF curve at idle, which, again, if you're changing the MAF information at idle, that unsettles the idle control and makes you chase your tail. All right, so let's go here and we'll click Start Scanning again. Now, what we're going to do, I have a chart versus time here, which should be this one here. You see engine speed, we have throttle, accelerator pedal, which isn't being logged here, and spark. We can take a look at some of the effect here of what's going on when we're firing it off. So we can evaluate the startup airflow. So let me go here and crank it over. It started right up there. It's pretty good. Now notice the engine RPM should start to dissipate. If we come down here, we're finding that we have our target, our desired RPM here. Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.